At a cousin's engagement, my parents laughed about my imaginary fiancé. So I toasted quietly, but waited until he walked in saying, "Sorry I'm late, had to park the helicopter," unaware we just landed from Dubai. I am 34 female am from a traditional Indian American family based in Northern California. My upbringing was deeply rooted in expectations: go to college, preferably Stanford or Berkeley, become a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, marry young, have 2 kids, and live within a 30-mile radius of your parents so they can babysit on weekends and inspect your spice rack. I derailed that script around age 21 when I chose to pursue design instead of medicine. That was strike 1. Strike 2 was when I dropped out of grad school after landing a job with a global marketing firm in Berlin. My parents, Arvind and Priya, didn't take that well. Freelancing to them translated to unemployed, and remote consulting sounded like sitting on your laptop all day, wasting time. Every time we spoke, I felt like I had to justify my life choices. But the biggest strike? Telling them I was engaged, and that they couldn't meet him just yet. They'd always been skeptical of my love life. I dated people from outside the community. I didn't go out of my way to introduce anyone unless I was serious. And when I met Zaid, then a pilot and aeronautics consultant based between Sweden and Qatar, I waited almost a year before even telling my family. When I finally did, my mother's first response was, "Why haven't we met him? Are you sure he's real?" It would have been funny if she hadn't actually believed I was lying. Fast forward to December of last year. My cousin Dia, 29 female, was getting engaged. Her fiancé, Arman, was an Ivy League educated cardiac surgeon who checked all the perfect Indian son-in-law boxes. The engagement party was set at a massive banquet hall in San Jose with no expense spared. A 3-day affair with catered buffets, choreographed dances, henna stations, even a sitar performance at brunch. I wasn't surprised when I got the invite, just surprised when it included a snarky postscript from my mother: "Hope your fiancé can make it this time, smiley face, yeah." Zaid and I had already planned to be in the US for a few weeks during the holidays. He had business meetings in Palo Alto, and we were visiting some of my friends down in LA. We landed at SFO from Dubai 2 days before the event. He had to attend a last-minute meeting the afternoon of the engagement, but promised he'd meet me there by dinner. The catch? We were flying around via helicopter since he was borrowing a friend's aircraft for travel, something that sounds over the top but was legitimately easier than dealing with Bay Area traffic and back-to-back events. I got to the venue alone. From the moment I walked in, it started. The whispers. The forced smiles. The questions I've come to expect from extended family: "Where's your fiancé? Still in, what is it, Doha? Have you thought about freezing your eggs? We just worry, Anika. You're such a free spirit." I bit my tongue. Smiled. Took selfies with Dia. Tried to focus on her, on being a supportive cousin. But then I heard my mother. Standing at a cocktail table near the bar, laughing with her sister, Dia's mom, and a few aunties. "I've stopped asking," she said. "She says he's in aviation." I said, "What does that even mean? Is he a flight attendant?" "She never shows photos." I told Arvind, "Maybe he's imaginary." They all laughed. Not subtle chuckles. Big, open-mouthed, "Can you believe this girl laughs?" I was holding a glass of sparkling water, trying not to let my hand shake. I should have walked away. Instead, I stood there, letting it wash over me. There was nothing left to say to them. But I knew what was coming. When the toast started after dinner, I was asked to say a few words. I think the planner just assumed everyone else had. Dia's friends, Armin's cousins, even Neil, my younger brother who I hadn't spoken to in months, said a few words about finding the one. Everyone looked toward me as I took the mic. I was wearing a wine-colored silk sari, hair up, gold jewelry, minimal but elegant. I stood there and looked out at a sea of faces that had never believed in me. I didn't rehearse. "I'll keep it short," I said. "I just want to say, it's beautiful watching 2 people who are supported, celebrated, and believed in." Not everyone gets that. So if you do, hold on to it. There was a polite smattering of claps. And then it happened. A loud mechanical thrum. At first faint. Then unmistakable. It was the sound of helicopter rotors. People started murmuring. Dia looked out the window, confused. The planner rushed to the door. And then, Zaid walked in. He was wearing a slim-fit navy blue suit, no tie, watch glinting under the chandelier lights, hair slightly windswept. He looked out of place, but in a way that made everyone else seem underdressed. "Sorry I'm late," he said, grinning. "Had to park the helicopter." Someone actually gasped. And then he walked straight over to me and kissed my forehead. "Did I miss your toast?" he asked, softly. "No," I said. "You're right on time." The room had changed. I didn't have to look around to know it. The temperature of the attention shifted, no longer tinged with skepticism, judgment, or that particular brand of fake politeness I'd gotten used to at these events. People were curious now. Alert. Their eyes followed Zaid as he politely introduced himself to the people closest to where we stood, including my aunt, Dia's mom, who suddenly looked like she wasn't sure how to rearrange her facial expression fast enough. And my mother? Her hands were fidgeting with the edge of her dupatta, her mouth parted just slightly, as if she couldn't decide whether to smile or remain in that half-smirk of disbelief she wore earlier. Zaid greeted her without hesitation. "Priya auntie, it's very nice to finally meet you," he said warmly, extending a hand. She took a beat longer than she needed to before accepting the handshake. "Oh," she said. "Yes. Of course. Hello." I'd heard her use that exact tone on neighbors she didn't really like but needed to stay civil with. The ones with barking dogs or too many lawn ornaments. Zaid turned to my father, who stood a few feet behind her, more composed but equally caught off guard. "Arvind uncle," he nodded. "I've heard so much about you." My dad gave him a firm handshake, masking the discomfort better than my mom, but I saw it, just a flicker in his eyes, a tightening around the jaw. He was sizing Zaid up, the way he did with prospective business partners or unfamiliar real estate developers. "I understand you work in aviation?" he asked. Zaid nodded. "Yes. Mostly consulting now, projects across Europe, the Gulf, and Asia. But I still fly occasionally. It keeps me grounded," ironically. A few people nearby laughed. Not because it was especially funny, but because they were recalibrating. Suddenly, I wasn't the delusional daughter who made up an international fiancé to save face at family events. I was the mysterious cousin who walked in alone and whose partner descended from the sky like a plot twist. Still, it wasn't about the helicopter. Okay, maybe it was a little bit about the helicopter. But mostly, it was about presence. About showing up. And Zaid had done that in a way no one in that room could ignore. As he got pulled into introductions by some of my second cousins and curious uncles, who suddenly found his work fascinating, I took a moment to observe the scene. It was surreal. I'd spent years walking into rooms like these, quietly bracing myself for judgment. And now? I was the storm. My cousin Neil, still smug from his speech earlier, made his way toward me during dessert. "So," he said, "that's your guy?" I looked at him, a little tired, but unwilling to let the moment slip by. "Yes," I said. "That's Zaid." He gave a short laugh, I still watching where Zaid stood with a small crowd around him. Didn't think he was real, to be honest. "Yeah," I said. "A lot of people didn't." He paused. Maybe to apologize. Maybe to pivot. But I didn't give him the chance. I walked away to check on Dia instead. To her credit, she didn't seem remotely bothered by the attention Zaid's entrance had attracted. She'd always been good that way, graceful, grounded, with just enough rebellion in her to support me quietly while never saying much to her mom. She squeezed my hand as I approached. "Best moment of the night," she whispered. "I wasn't trying to upstage you," I said, honestly. "You didn't," she replied. You just reclaimed your place. And it was about damn time. Later in the evening, my mom pulled me aside near the staircase that led down to the valet area. She looked unsettled but also curious. "Why didn't you tell us he was coming?" she asked. I shrugged. "Would it have changed anything?" She hesitated. I didn't realize." "What didn't you realize?" I asked, arms crossed. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. "I didn't realize he was this serious." And there it was. The weight of every conversation we'd never had. Every moment where I tried to explain my life and was met with concern, doubt, dismissal. The way they'd made me feel like I was performing adulthood incorrectly because I didn't follow the script. But she was trying now. Clumsily. Slowly. But trying. "I'm glad you came," she added after a beat. "Me too," I said. And I meant it. Not for them. For me. Zaid found me a little while later on the rooftop garden attached to the venue. It was quieter up there, away from the lights and cameras and endless buffet lines. He wrapped his arms around me from behind and rested his chin on my shoulder. "How'd it go?" he asked. I smiled, watching the skyline glitter in the distance. "Better than I expected," I said. "Worse than it should have had to be." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "They'll catch up." "I'm not waiting," I said. "I know," he replied, pulling me closer. We stood there a while longer. The music below us had shifted to something slower, softer. Conversations carried into the night like wind. I didn't know what would happen next with my family, whether they'd try harder, whether this night would really change anything. But I knew this: for once, they saw me. And more importantly, I saw myself. Zaid and I stayed up on that rooftop until almost everyone had gone. The stars were dim above the Bay Area haze, but the air had cleared. Below us, the party dwindled into that awkward stretch of time when aunties start packing Tupperware and uncles linger with whiskey tumblers, not ready to leave but not adding anything to the conversation either. We watched it all from above, like spectators of a play we no longer needed to act in. Eventually, we came down to say goodbye to Dia and Armin. They were on the dance floor again, slightly tipsy and glowing with the ease of people who didn't have to fight for approval. I hugged Dia tightly. "You did great," I told her. "So did you," she replied. "You have no idea how satisfying that was for me." We both laughed. Armin offered Zaid a fist bump, and Zaid responded with that calm, collected confidence he always carried. As we headed to the valet line, I could feel my parents' eyes on us from across the room. They didn't say much during our exit. My dad gave a polite nod. My mom gave Zaid a thin-lipped smile that almost passed for warmth. It was fine. I wasn't expecting transformation. But I also knew something had shifted. Maybe not dramatically, not overnight, but tectonically. When we got back to the hotel, I peeled off my sari, wiped the kajal from my eyes, and collapsed on the bed with a dramatic groan. "That bad?" Zaid asked, already half out of his suit, tie tossed onto the couch. "Not bad," I said, staring at the ceiling. "Just heavy." You ever walk into a room where everyone's pretending you're invisible, and then all of a sudden, they're trying to memorize your resume? He chuckled. "Yeah. Most rooms, actually." I laughed too. Because that was part of why we worked. He understood things I never had to explain twice. "Do you regret it?" he asked after a pause. "What?" "Tonight. Coming." I sat up slightly, resting on my elbows. "No. Not even for a second." Because the truth is, even with all the tension, the passive-aggressive commentary, the long years of being sidelined and misunderstood, this moment, this shift, was something I'd needed. Not to validate my life or my relationship, but to confront what had been hanging over me for years. Zaid lay beside me, one arm behind his head. "You didn't need me to prove anything," he said quietly. "You already did." "Maybe. But still, it helped. The next few days were strange. There was no explosive fallout, no big confrontation, no sudden invitations for dinner or emotional apologies. But things started happening. Small things. My father sent me a link to a property article from Forbes, saying, "Reminds me of one of the projects you mentioned." Interesting read. My mother sent a message in the family group chat with a photo of the engagement party, one where Zaid and I were standing near the stage, smiling. Caption: "Look who finally made it into the family album." It was the first time she'd ever acknowledged him publicly. My aunt, Dia's mom, the one who laughed the loudest at the imaginary fiancé joke, sent me a Facebook friend request and liked 3 of my old travel photos from Jordan and Croatia. Even Neil texted. "Neil, hey. Sorry if I've been a JRK." That was impressive. Me, not sure if that's an apology or a TED Talk intro. "Neil, let's go with both." I didn't respond. Not right away. But I saw it for what it was. An olive branch wrapped in typical older brother sarcasm. One afternoon, back in San Mateo, I visited my childhood home for a quick drop-off. My mom had left a few items she wanted me to pick up, some jewelry from an old box, a shawl that had belonged to my grandmother, a pressure cooker she insisted was too premium to ship overseas. Zaid stayed in the car, scrolling on his phone, while I went in. Inside, the house looked the same. Still smelled of incense and coriander. The framed family portraits in the hallway had been updated. Newer ones included Dia and Armin. And one, a recent addition, showed me and Zaid at the engagement, side by side, smiling. I stopped. "Did you print this?" I asked when my mom came into the hallway. She looked at the photo, then at me. "Dia emailed it," she said. "I liked it. It's a nice picture." "It is." There was a long silence. She adjusted a vase on the console table even though it didn't need adjusting. "I may have misjudged," she said finally. "He seems thoughtful." I wasn't sure how to respond. It wasn't an apology. But it was the closest we'd ever gotten. "I never needed you to be impressed," I said. "I just needed you to stop assuming I was lying." She didn't argue. For once. "You've always done things differently," she said. "That's hard for us to understand. But maybe different doesn't mean wrong." It was a moment. An incomplete one. But still, a crack in the wall. I took the box she handed me, hugged her briefly, and left before either of us could ruin it by saying too much. When I got back to the car, Zaid glanced at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah." He didn't push for more. That's another reason I love him. He knows that sometimes, silence is the loudest kind of peace. We flew back to Dubai a few days later. The trip had drained me emotionally in ways I hadn't fully processed until we landed back on our own turf, with the warm, dry air hitting my face and the hum of Arabic and English blending in the background. The city was noisy, alive, and unapologetically bold, so unlike the quiet, tiptoeing version of myself I often became in my parents' world. Zaid and I didn't talk about the engagement party for a while. We didn't need to. The trip had done what it needed to do, and now, we returned to the rhythm we knew. Late dinners on the balcony. Weekends at the marina. Flights to meetings in Riyadh or Paris. We were back to us. But something lingered. Not bitterness. Not even the need for approval anymore. It was the itch of unfinished business. Back in California, my parents had made tiny steps toward acknowledging my life. But they had never truly understood what I had built. Or what it had cost me. For years, they mocked and doubted, confident in the superiority of their path. They didn't think I was capable of making something real, of making something mine. And I didn't want them to just come around. I wanted them to watch me win, loudly and undeniably. And that's where the idea came from. A few months after our return, Zaid and I were invited to speak at a high-profile business summit in Dubai. He was giving a talk on aviation logistics in emerging markets. I was being honored for my branding consultancy, which had just hit a seven-figure milestone after signing a contract with a major luxury conglomerate. They wanted a speaker to talk about building personal brands across cultures and scaling without VC funding. And they picked me. I told them I'd do it, on one condition: that I could invite guests. The event planners agreed. I sent 2 priority invitations to my parents with a handwritten note: "You once asked if I was serious about my life. I'd like to show you what serious looks like." They didn't reply for 3 days. Then I got a text from my mother: "We'll be there." When they arrived in Dubai, Zaid picked them up in our Tesla, not the helicopter, we'd done that already, and took them to our home, a sleek 3-bedroom apartment overlooking the Palm, with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open kitchen. My mother's eyes darted from the modern lighting to the Moroccan tilework. My father tried not to comment, but I could see it: the surprise, the disbelief, the recalibration. They hadn't pictured this. They thought I lived like a bohemian expat with mismatched furniture and student loan debt. Not someone who hosted investor dinners on her rooftop and signed NDAs with billion-dollar clients. The next night at the summit, I stood on stage in a white tailored pantsuit, hair pulled back, every inch the woman I'd fought to become. I told my story, not about the family drama, not directly, but about rejection, resilience, and being underestimated. About having the audacity to believe that my work was valid even when no one else did. I talked about making my own table when none had a seat for me. And my parents were in the front row. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father clapped a beat longer than the rest. After the talk, people came up to congratulate me. Entrepreneurs, executives, even minor royalty. My father stood nearby, shaking hands like he was at one of his own business conferences. That night, over dinner, my mother turned to Zaid and said, "Thank you for standing beside her. For believing in her when we didn't." He smiled politely, but didn't say "You're welcome." Because it wasn't about them anymore. The real revenge wasn't making them jealous. It was making them irrelevant to my success. I didn't need their approval. But it was satisfying, so deeply satisfying, to see the doubt in their eyes replaced by awe. To watch them realize that I hadn't just landed on my feet. I had soared. Later that week, before they flew back to California, my father pulled me aside on the balcony. "You've done well," he said. "I didn't see it before. But you've built something." I looked at him. This man who had once told me that art and design were hobbies, not careers. Who'd offered to pay for me to go back to grad school just 2 years ago because he was worried I'd end up alone. "I know," I said. He nodded, then added, "I'm proud of you." It took 34 years to hear that. And by the time he said it, I didn't need it. But I welcomed it all the same. That, to me, was the best kind of revenge. Not the helicopter. Not the speech. Not the business class tickets or the view of the sea from my kitchen. The revenge was growing into the person they never imagined I could be, and then giving them a front row seat.